There's a moment that doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, in the middle of an ordinary conversation. Someone talks over you, someone dismisses what you just said, someone looks right through you like you're furniture in the room, and you don't say anything. You smile, you nod, you let it pass. And then later, maybe in the car on the way home, maybe lying awake at 2 a.m., you feel it, that slow burn in your chest, that quiet question you're almost too ashamed to say out loud. Why don't people respect me? If you're in your 40s, 50s or 60s and that question has crossed your mind, this video is for you. Not because you're broken, not because you've failed at life, but because somewhere along the way you learnt something that was wrong, something the people around you never corrected, something that has been costing you, quietly, steadily, for years. You were taught that respect is something you earn through being agreeable, through not causing trouble, through being helpful, flexible, low maintenance, through making yourself easy to deal with, through swallowing what you really think and giving people the version of you they're most comfortable with. And here's the brutal truth of it. That strategy doesn't earn respect. It trains people to take you for granted. Let's be honest about what this actually feels like at this stage of life. Because you are not a kid anymore. You've lived through things. You've worked hard. You've sacrificed. You've shown up for people who didn't always show up for you. You've made peace with a lot of disappointments that would have floored a younger version of yourself. And yet, you still find yourself in rooms where your opinion doesn't seem to land, where you speak and people half listen, where decisions get made around you instead of with you, where your experience, decades of it, is quietly set aside in favor of someone louder, younger, or more willing to perform confidence. That is a specific kind of pain, and it doesn't get talked about enough. For the men watching this, maybe it shows up at work. You've been doing this for 30 years, you know things, but something shifted. You're not the sharpest edge in the room anymore, and you can feel it. The younger colleagues don't look to you the way they once might have. The promotions or opportunities that should acknowledge your history seem to go sideways, and instead of confronting it, you've been managing it, staying quiet, being the professional, hoping the work speaks for itself. It doesn't always speak for itself. You have to. For the women watching this, maybe it shows up differently. Maybe it's at family gatherings where your voice carries less weight than it once did. Maybe it's the slow realization that a lifetime of being capable, being the one who manages everything, being gracious and competent and steady, somehow translated into people expecting that of you rather than appreciating it. You became the person everyone leans on. And the cost of that is that leaning became assumed. Your boundaries, when you finally drew them, surprised people because they'd never needed to notice you had any. Both of those experiences come from the same root. You taught people how to treat you, not intentionally, not through weakness, but through consistency, through pattern, through years of signaling in small and large ways that your comfort could be traded for someone else's ease. And now you're here, carrying a frustration you can barely name, wondering if this is just how it is. It is not how it has to be. Here's what nobody tells you about respect at this age. It's not about becoming louder. It's not about becoming harder or colder or more aggressive. It's not about reinventing yourself or faking a confidence you don't feel. You don't have to perform anything. Real respect, the kind that lasts, the kind that's built on something solid, comes from alignment. It comes when the way you present yourself on the outside matches the values you hold on the inside. When what you say and what you do and what you will and won't accept all point in the same direction. Most people never get there. They live their whole lives slightly out of alignment, saying yes when they mean no, staying in rooms they should have left, tolerating things that quietly corrode their sense of self, and they wonder why they feel invisible. Here's the non-obvious truth that changes everything. Respect is not given to you by other people. Respect is a reflection. It shows you in real time how much of yourself you've decided to stand behind. Let that land for a moment. Every time you shrink to make someone else comfortable, you send a signal, not just to them, to yourself. You teach your own nervous system that your needs, your opinions, your presence are negotiable. And once that becomes the operating mode, It leaks into everything. Your posture, your tone, the way you pause before speaking, as if asking permission, the way you explain yourself too much, justify too much, apologize for existing in spaces that are yours to occupy. People read that. They may not consciously know what they're reading, but they feel it, and they respond accordingly. The Stoics had a word for what's missing in that dynamic. They called it dignity, not in the performance sense, not in the stiff, formal, I am very important sense. Dignity in the original sense of the word, the sense of knowing your own worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. Marcus Aurelius didn't rule the Roman Empire by being liked. He didn't earn the loyalty of soldiers and senators by making himself agreeable. He earned it by being the same man in every room, in public and in private, in victory and in failure. He was relentlessly, consistently himself. That consistency is what people trusted. That consistency is what commanded respect without demanding it. And that's the shift we're going to talk about in this video. Not how to intimidate people, not how to manipulate a room, not how to fake authority you don't feel, how to align, how to become the person on the outside that you already are on the inside, how to stop apologizing for taking up space, how to make respect real, lasting, earned respect, the natural consequence of how you move through the world. This is something the Stoics understood deeply, and it is completely learnable at any age, including yours. And before we go deeper into this, if this kind of content speaks to you, if this feels like the conversation you've been waiting to have, hit that subscribe button. We are building something real here, not a highlight reel, not empty motivation. Real philosophy, delivered straight, for people who have lived enough life to know the difference. I want you to be part of this. Now let's talk about why so many good, capable, experienced people end up invisible. Because here's what I've noticed. The people who struggle most with being respected are often not the people you'd expect. They're not the weak ones. They're not the passive ones. They're often the most competent people in the room, the ones who do the most, carry the most, give the most. They struggle with respect because they confused value with visibility. They believed, because they were often told, explicitly or implicitly, that doing good work is enough, that being reliable is enough, that being kind is enough, that if you simply are good, the world will notice and respond in kind. And in a fair world, maybe that would be true. But the world is not a fair accounting system. It is a social ecosystem. And social ecosystems respond not just to what you are, but to how clearly you signal what you are. Think about someone you know. Maybe you've worked with this person. Maybe you've watched them from a distance. Someone who walks into a room and the energy shifts slightly. Not because they're loud, not because they're trying to dominate, but because there's something settled about them. Something clear. You get the immediate sense that this person knows who they are, knows what they stand for, and isn't particularly interested in your approval of either. That quality is magnetic, and it is not a personality trait you're born with. It is a practice. And the Stoics built an entire framework around how to develop it. That framework has a name. Marcus Aurelius called it living according to your nature. Epictetus called it knowing what is and isn't in your control. But if you strip both of those down to their practical core, what they were actually describing was this. A person who commands respect is a person who has stopped outsourcing their self-definition to other people. Read that again. Most of us, without realizing it, walk through the world with an invisible questionnaire. We hand it to every room we enter, every person we meet, every interaction we have. And the question on that questionnaire is always some version of, am I okay? Am I enough? Do you approve of me? We don't do this consciously. We do it in the way we laugh a little too quickly at someone else's joke, in the way we soften our opinions the moment we sense disagreement, in the way we over-explain ourselves when we should simply state ourselves, in the way we feel that small, quiet collapse inside when someone doesn't respond the way we hoped. You've felt that collapse. Most people your age have been feeling it for decades, quietly, without ever naming it. The Stoics named it. And more importantly, they explained exactly where it comes from. Epictetus, a man who started life as a literal slave, a man who had every external reason to feel diminished, said something that should stop you in your tracks. He said, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things." What he meant, what he spent an entire life teaching, was that your suffering, your sense of smallness, your hunger for validation, none of it comes from what other people actually think of you. It comes from what you have decided their opinion is worth, and that decision is yours to change. Let me give you a character, not a historical figure yet, a real kind of person you probably recognize. Her name is Carol, 58 years old, 22 years in healthcare administration. She has run teams, navigated bureaucracies, solved problems that would have broken younger people. She is competent in a way that is almost unfair, and she is invisible. In meetings, her ideas get half heard and then restated by someone louder, and suddenly the room credits the louder person. Her manager rarely asks her opinion, even though her opinion is almost always right. When she speaks up, people listen, and then move on, as if what she said was background noise rather than signal. Carol is not weak. Carol is not lacking in value. Carol has simply never learned to stand inside her own authority. She hedges. I might be wrong, but she minimizes. This is just a small thought. She seeks consensus before she's even finished her own sentence. Does that make sense? Am I being clear? Every one of those habits sends a message. Not the message Carol intends, not "I am thoughtful and collaborative." The message those habits actually send is, "I'm not entirely sure I'm allowed to take up this space." And rooms respond to the message, not the intention. Now here is where Marcus Aurelius becomes relevant in the most practical way possible. Marcus was not born confident. He was not born commanding. He was born into the most politically dangerous environment imaginable, the Roman imperial court, where the wrong perception could end your life. And he kept a private journal, never meant for anyone else to read, in which he relentlessly coached himself back to center, back to clarity, back to his own standard, back to the one place where respect is actually built. That journal became what we now call the Meditations. And in it, Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't talking about positive thinking. He was talking about a very specific kind of discipline, the discipline of not letting the noise outside determine the ground you stand on inside. So here is the core Stoic principle that everything we've said today comes back to. Respect, real, lasting, bone-deep respect, is not given to you by other people. It is recognized by other people, in you. That is a crucial distinction. What you are chasing when you perform for approval, when you over-explain, when you soften and hedge and collapse, you are chasing something that cannot be given because it doesn't live outside of you. It lives inside of you. Other people can only perceive it once it exists. They cannot install it in you with their approval, and no amount of their validation will fill that hole, because the hole isn't shaped like validation. It's shaped like self-definition. The Stoics were ruthless about this. They did not believe in waiting for the world to hand you your dignity. They believed you had to establish it internally first, through what they called virtue, and then live from that place outward, regardless of whether the room responded. This is why Cato walked through the streets of Rome dressed like a common man, when Roman culture expected senators to display their status in every stitch of their clothing. He wasn't making a political statement. He was practicing what the Stoics called indifference to opinion. He was demonstrating, to himself as much as anyone, that his identity was not located in their perception of him. And the result? He became one of the most respected men in Rome, not because he chased respect, because he stopped needing it in a way that made it flow naturally toward him. That is the paradox your whole life may have been circling without anyone ever handing you the map. Now let's make this concrete, because philosophy without practice is just decoration. Here is what this actually looks like in your life, starting today. Step 1. Stop apologizing for occupying space. Pay attention this week to how many times you soften a statement that didn't need softening. I might be wrong, but no. State it, own it, If you turn out to be wrong, you can update, but stop preemptively asking permission to have an opinion. You've earned your perspective through decades of living. Speak it like someone who knows that. This is not about arrogance. Arrogance is insecurity wearing a mask. This is about basic self-ownership. When you walk into a room, you are not there on probation. You are there. That's enough. Practice this specifically in low-stakes moments, at a coffee shop, in a casual conversation, in a meeting where you'd normally hedge. Notice how people respond differently when you state rather than request. Step 2. Decide your standard before you enter the room. The Stoics had a pre-commitment practice. Before any significant event, a conversation, a confrontation, a difficult interaction, they would set their internal standard ahead of time. Not "I hope this goes well," but rather, "What kind of person do I intend to be in this moment, regardless of what happens?" This is not a ritual, it is a reset. It pulls your identity out of the hands of whatever the situation might throw at you and places it back where it belongs, in your own grip. Before your next difficult conversation, your next meeting, your next family dinner where the dynamics tend to undo you, take 60 seconds beforehand and ask yourself, what do I stand for, and am I willing to stand there even if this gets uncomfortable? That question, asked consistently, is where self-respect is actually built. Step 3. Audit who you're performing for. This one is the hardest and the most important. Take one honest look at the relationships, environments, and situations in your life where you consistently feel small, overlooked, or invisible. Now ask yourself this: how much of that invisibility is something being done to you, and how much of it is something you are participating in? Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because somewhere along the way, you learned to make yourself smaller in exchange for safety, for belonging, for peace. That was a survival strategy, and it served you once. But Epictetus was clear. The moment you locate your worth in someone else's response to you, you have handed them the keys to your own freedom. Take the keys back. Not all at once, not with a dramatic confrontation or a declaration. Just take one key back this week. Reclaim one space where you have been making yourself smaller than you are. That's how this starts. Quietly, decisively, one room at a time. And that process, quiet, decisive, one room at a time, is exactly what the Stoics meant when they talked about living according to your nature. Not your wounded nature, not the version of you that learned to shrink. Your actual nature, the one that existed before the apologies, before the accommodations, before you decided that keeping the peace was worth more than keeping yourself. Most people think respect is something you earn through achievement, get the promotion, build the business, hit the milestone, prove something visible and undeniable, and then, finally, people will treat you the way you deserve to be treated. And here is where that story breaks down. Because you have probably already achieved things, real things, and yet you are still watching people talk over you at the table, still editing yourself in certain rooms, still leaving conversations with that hollow, low-grade feeling that you disappeared somewhere in the middle of them. So if achievement were the answer, it would have worked by now. The truth the Stoics understood, and that took Marcus Aurelius years of his own journals to fully accept, is that respect does not travel from the outside in. It moves from the inside out. You do not earn it from others and then finally feel it yourself. You cultivate it in yourself first, and then other people begin to mirror it back. This is not a small distinction. This is the entire reframe. Think about someone you genuinely respect, not someone you admire for their status or their wealth. Someone you actually respect, in your gut, when you are in the room with them. Now ask yourself, what is it specifically that you are responding to? It is almost never their resume. It is almost never what they own or what they have accomplished in the abstract. It is the way they carry themselves, the fact that they do not seem to be auditioning, the fact that their words and their body and their presence all seem to be saying the same thing at the same time. They are not performing, they are not managing, they are simply there, fully, without apology. That quality has a name in Stoic philosophy. They called it dignity. and they believed it was not given to you by circumstance. It was chosen, moment by moment, by how you decided to show up. The shift happens when you stop asking, how do I get them to respect me, and start asking, am I respecting myself enough to deserve my own presence in this room? That question changes everything. Let me tell you about a woman named Margaret. Not a philosopher, not a historical figure. Just a woman in her late 50s who came to this realization the hard way. For most of her adult life, Margaret was what people called the dependable one. She showed up. She solved problems, she absorbed the moods of difficult people and smoothed everything over. At work, in her family, in her marriage. And for years she told herself that was a virtue, strength even. What she eventually admitted, in her own words, was that it was fear with a good reputation. She was not being generous, she was being careful. She had learned early that if she was useful enough and agreeable enough and small enough, she would not be abandoned. The moment she recognized that pattern, she said, felt like being handed a pair of glasses after years of squinting. She did not become someone else. She did not suddenly become aggressive or cold or difficult. She just stopped disappearing. She started finishing her sentences. She stopped laughing at things she didn't find funny. She started arriving to conversations with an opinion already formed instead of waiting to see which way the room was leaning. And what happened? Some people were confused, a few were annoyed, but the ones who mattered, the relationships that were real, deepened, because she was finally actually present in them. That is the proof. Respect does not cost you your relationships. It costs you the ones that only existed because you were willing to be less than yourself. Those are not losses, those are releases. Epictetus taught something that sounds simple until you sit with it. He said, never depend on the admiration of others. There is no strength in it. Read that again. Not be independent of others' opinions because you shouldn't care about people. That is not what he meant. Human connection mattered deeply to the Stoics. What he meant was this: when your sense of your own worth is contingent on whether someone in front of you confirms it, you are not free. You are operating at the mercy of every mood, every distraction, every thoughtless comment of every person you encounter. And you have probably felt that. The way one dismissive remark from the right person can undo a whole week. The way a room full of people treating you well cannot quite cancel out one person who seems to look through you. That asymmetry, the fact that the negative always seems louder than the positive, is what happens when you are outsourcing your self-assessment. The Stoic solution is not to stop caring about people. It is to stop asking people to do the job that only you can do. Your dignity is not a verdict rendered by a committee. It is a standard you set and then hold consistently, especially when holding it is uncomfortable, especially when the room is not cooperating. And here is the practical reality of that. When you hold your standard with enough consistency, other people begin to feel it before you even say a word. They adjust. Not because you have intimidated them, not because you have demanded anything, but because human beings are exquisitely sensitive to the presence or absence of self-respect in other people, and they respond to it accordingly, almost instinctively. You have felt it from others. Now it is time to become it yourself. Here is what you do with this, starting today. 1. Stop seeking confirmation before you speak. The next time you are about to say something and you feel yourself hesitating, waiting to read the room, waiting to see if it is safe, say it anyway. Not aggressively, just clearly. Let the words land without the hedge underneath them that signals you are not sure you have the right to take up space. You do. Claim it. 2. Set your standard before you walk in. Before any significant interaction today, a meeting, a conversation, a phone call, a family dinner, take 60 seconds. Ask yourself, what do I stand for, and am I willing to hold that even if this gets uncomfortable? Write it down if you need to. 1 sentence. Then walk in as that person. 3. Identify one place where you have been performing smallness. One relationship, one environment, one recurring situation where you consistently leave feeling less than you are. And this week, do one thing differently in that space. Not a confrontation, not a declaration. Just one small act of reclamation. Finish a sentence. Keep your seat. Say the thing you usually swallow. That is where it starts. That is where it always starts. Marcus Aurelius, a man who held more power than almost any human being in history, wrote this to himself in private, not for publication, not for reputation, just as a reminder he apparently needed to hear again and again. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Not strength from winning, not strength from being admired, not strength from finally getting the world to cooperate with your worth. Strength from deciding, from holding your standard when no one else is watching, from being, quietly and without performance, exactly who you said you were going to be. That is what respect is. Not a reward, not an outcome, a practice. And you can start it today. Not when circumstances improve, not when people finally recognize you, not when the timing is better. Today. Endure, adapt, overcome.